We're back here on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast, and you pressed play. I'm so excited, so happy, and honestly, so humbled that you would press play and listen to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast over and over and over again, the place where we uplift and honor coaches around the country. And today is no different. In fact, I'm actually really excited about this one because I think this is going to go in some areas that I don't have a lot of experience in, but it's exactly tangential with track and field and extremely important. So help me welcome from UW-Parkside, University of Wisconsin Parkside. We're going to talk about University of Wisconsin system because that system up there is nutsos up there. Help me welcome the head strength and conditioning coach from UW-Parkside, the great, the wise, the wonderful Miss Carly Fehler. Carly, how are you doing today?
Hi, Mike. I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm been looking forward to this. So excited to be here.
You gave me a great way to say your last name, and I still almost screwed it up. Did you hear the pause? I was like, Taylor with an F. Fehler.
Nah, you nailed it. You nailed it.
Thank you. Carly, thanks for joining us. You know, I just gave out your title, one of your titles, as head strength and conditioning coach. And, you know, probably people are listening, wondering like, wait a minute, this is the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast. What in the world do you have a strength and conditioning coach? We're going to get there. We're going to figure that part out because you know she has a track background. There's no way she'd be on the podcast if there wasn't some kind of track connection here. So let's get in our Wayback Machine here, Carly. Where does track and field coaching, where does that start for you?
Yeah. So I've had a really, really wonderful track experience, and that really took off, I would say, when I got to college. So I got recruited by a bunch of the UW schools, like you just kind of mentioned, and ended up going to UW-Eau Claire, and truly just had a life-changing experience. And that's really why I got into coaching, was based on the experience that I had there. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher and coach high school track, and I would say coach a little bit more casually. And based on the experience that I had at Eau Claire and just the phenomenal coaches and just the very special thing that they've got going on there, even now, I was like, you know what? We need to like do this all the time, because I really don't want to do anything that doesn't have to do with track and field. I used to joke around with people that like I majored in track and field in college and like all this stuff. And then I kind of ended up doing that based on going into coaching full time, and going and getting my master's and doing the GA thing and all of that. And so I really became all in when I was at Eau Claire, and I tried to kind of be all in everything that I do. And I think that's really where how we're kind of here a little bit. And so I've had a really, really wonderful track experience, and glad to still be a part of it.
So take a step back, because you mentioned when you were being recruited out of high school that you knew I'm going to be an English teacher and a track coach. So something had to be involved in your high school athletic experience of like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. What was it about, whether it was your high school coaches, whether it was an English teacher, maybe some family members were track coaches or teachers? Where was it in high school that you were set like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a track coach. I'm going to teach no matter where I go?
So I had a couple of really great English teachers when I was in high school, that I really looked up to. One of them was also my track coach, so there's probably some connection there. And I just really I understood starting in high school that like, okay, I was kind of good at this, and people generally enjoy doing things that they're good at. And so for me, it was kind of one of the first things where I was like, okay, this is one of those things that might be your thing, right? Everyone has their thing. And I started to figure out in high school that that was going to be my thing. And I remember we had a really big girls team, and it felt like I was one of 5 people that was really, really into it. And I'm like, all right, like you've got something here, right? Like you really care about this. You're really excited about it. You happen to also be okay at it, which helps. And so I really was just like, I just had this inkling, even when I was young, that like track was going to open a lot of doors for me. And, now looking back, I won't tell you how many years later, like it's really, it's just really special, like how true that ended up being for me.
So what kind of high school athlete were you? You mentioned a large team and you're one of maybe 5 that kind of we all take it in different degrees of seriousness. You seem to be maybe taking it a little bit more serious as a high school athlete. So were you, I hear a lot, and we hear that, all through the social media world of how, our young kids, they don't know who today's stars are and all this kind of stuff. And it's so much easier today than it was, at least back when I was in high school. There was no social media. I had to wait for track and field news to figure out who the studs were and then Olympics on TV. Were you the type of athlete who, and we haven't mentioned exactly what events you did, at least what area, but were you the type of athlete that knew who the state champions were in your area, who the colleges that were good, the professionals, or a little bit more casual from you?
Yeah, so I wouldn't describe myself as a very casual person by nature. Like
Okay.
I'm very like passion is kind of my word that I use to describe myself. So in term like even when I was in high school, like I knew all the things, I knew all the people. I followed all of the updates and the Olympics and everything. Like I was very, when I find something that I enjoy, I'm just kind of full speed ahead. It's really 0 or 100 with me, which is probably why I was a sprinter. So to kind of answer your question from before, so when I was in high school, I did just the 100. I didn't run the 200. I can't really tell you why. And I did long jump. So those are and actually I got recruited as a long jumper out of high school.
Hmm.
And so, and then when I got to Eau Claire, started sprinting a lot more and those kinds of things. And that piece took off a little bit more. And so I ended up running the 60 and the 2 indoors, and then the 1, the 2, and our 4x1 outdoors. So
It's interesting. You mentioned earlier that we all like to do our thing, maybe something that we're a little bit more talented in, or something we at least have more interest in, and we all find our thing. And I'm convinced that finding your thing is actually a very special thing. I don't know that the majority of us actually find our thing.
I agree.
For example, Carly, you actually might have been one of the world's best painters, but because you weren't in that culture growing up of artistic and painting and things like that,
Yeah.
we'll never know. And some of us find it as a 50-year-old, 60-year-old, and eventually feel like, oh my goodness, I found music. I never, like I always liked music, but I didn't have that culture. And so I found music. So I'm not sure we actually all find it. However, there are little micro findings along the way. You've already mentioned how special your time at Eau Claire was. How did you find Eau Claire? What were other opportunities? And what steered you towards Eau Claire? And I'm so glad it did, because obviously, it's a great experience for you, but you easily could have gone to a Parkside, which another great school. There's a lot of other places you had opportunities, choices. What was it about Eau Claire that brought you in? And then what about that experience your face lights up when you talk about your time there as an athlete.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So one of my mentors, one of my basketball coaches in high school, actually, she was instrumental for me in a lot of the things that I was navigating when I was in high school, and then kind of deciding to go to college. Like I was one of those kids that didn't really think about going to college. And I remember I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and so it wasn't something I thought a lot about. And then as track started to take off a little bit, and I'm getting recruiting letters in the mail, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And or what do I want to do with this? And so my that mentor that I speak of, she went to Eau Claire. And that was one of the schools that had reached out to me, and I'm like, you know what, we'll go up there, we'll meet Chip. And I remember, oh my gosh, I remember my recruiting day visit like it was yesterday, and loved it, had a great time. And I remember being in the car with my mom on the way home, and I remember turning to her and saying, I think I can learn from him. And what a premonition type of statement to make, because that's really kind of the story of the last 10 years, I would say, is the time I spent learning from Chip.
You took other visits.
I did.
But there was something about this visit in Chip of like, yeah, I can learn from this guy.
Yes. Yep. There was just something about Chip, and I had gone on
Very
other
cool.
visits and talked with other coaches, and I won't go too far into that. I'm not here to roast anybody.
No, 100%. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I just really connected with Chip, and I just felt like there was something there. And I am thankfully, my gut was right, and I just really had a kind of unbelievable time at Eau Claire. So
why track over basketball or any other sport or activity you might have played?
Honestly, you know how high school sports can be sometimes. There's some politics and things like that. And so I played basketball all grown up, first couple of years in high school. And then as I really started to get track started to take off, I decided to run AAU track instead of continuing to play basketball, which
Mm.
turned out to be a pretty good idea. So that's kind of how I started to focus in on track specifically.
Okay. Yeah, I was always interested. I think about my own professional career. I played football and track in high school, not professionally. But when I went to go coach high school, the where I lived was right across the street from high school, right across from the football field. And I remember consciously, I loved football. I was a starter. It was great. I'm from Alabama, so I have to love football, right? But I consciously called the track coach to see if they needed a volunteer coach, et cetera. And that set me on, I ended up going to coach in the SEC. And I do sometimes wonder, I'm like, what if I called the football coach? Like, I'm just, what would that path have looked like? I could be a millionaire, fired head coach somewhere,
Or both, a lot of people are both.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned you've had that gut feeling of like this guy Chip, and you need to identify Chip for us. Not everybody, not everybody's in the Parkside Eau Claire
Sure.
environment here. But what did you end up to introduce him for us? Let us know who this is, and also, so what did you learn? What you had that gut feeling that I can learn something from this guy. What did you end up learning in your undergrad years?
Yeah, so Chip Schneider is the director of cross country and track and field at University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. And I would say one of the biggest things I learned from Chip was how to be all in.
Mm.
And you hear that idea of, okay, I'm 110% committed, or like I'm giving 120% effort, right? The piece that people forget about that is that extra, there's only 100%, right? And that extra 10 or 20% has to come from something else.
Mm.
If you want to be 100% in on track, then you can't be 100% in on going home on the weekends to see your family. And you can't be 100% in on like getting a 4.0. You might have to settle for a 3.5, right? And I think Chip was someone that gave me permission to do that.
That bears repeating. That's really interesting because you do hear this all the time, right? I give it 110%. I've seen lately, I'm committed 1,000%. It's like, how far do we go before we just stop? It's the ultimate, right?
Yeah.
But I like that. I've never thought about that other side. It's like, okay, you can, I'm always the guy that says, well, you can't be 120%. There's only 100. Yeah, I'm that stickler, right? But I like that. It's the philosophy of it. Okay,
Yeah.
you're going to be all in on track or academics or art or whatever your thing is. That's cool. And that's great. But that means something else has to suffer. And that could be
Yeah.
grades, it could be relationships, it could be social life, phone time, etc. Probably a combination of a few of those things. That's really important. So how did he teach you that? What was there? Do you remember like was there a hard discussion of like you were also trying to do 120% of your social life, and he was like, hey, look, if you want to do this, you're all in. Well, here's what you're going to have to give up. Or was there a saying, or what there has to be some, not necessarily a core memory of like a specific instance, but it could be like an overall philosophy of, every day he told us X, or every agenda he handed out, this slogan was on there. How did he teach you that aspect?
Yeah, I think it was more like a general like feeling and vibe and guidance that I got from him. We had some family stuff going on at the time, and I was driving back and forth from Eau Claire to home, and home is just south of Milwaukee for me. So I'm from Oak Creek, and so I'm driving back and forth, and I'm missing practice like that first year at Eau Claire, missing practice, missing meets, and he finally called me in the office. He's like, "All right, what's going on?" And I kind of, shared what was going on, and he's like, "You're a little young to be taking on all that responsibility and trying to be the adult in that situation." And he essentially gave me permission to just be a college kid and not try to wear all these different hats that I was trying to wear at the time. And that's part of why him and I have such a close relationship is, being able to have some of those really, really personal and intimate conversations about both of our families and what both, what led us to really both being at Eau Claire and all of Chip's experiences too, because, you know, he was a two-time national champ when he was in college, and him and I had a lot of conversations about what that takes, right? And I think a lot of people talk about, okay, what are you willing to give for this? But what are you, the other half, like we were just talking about, is what are you willing to give up to pursue this? And that is the piece that I think a lot of people miss on. And I think right now in this day and age, you got everyone wants to show all their workouts on TikTok and all their, you know, their social media, and how much they're doing, right? And how much they're giving. I want to know what you're giving up.
Mhm. Yeah. Sounds like he connected with you as a person over connecting with you as an athlete. Like, hey, you're missing practice. I don't care what the excuse. I've heard this before. This is not unheard
Yeah.
of. Hey, you missed
Yeah.
practice. There's no excuses, right? You hear the no excuses all the time. No excuses, no reasons. There's nothing more important. You came here to run track, Carly. You need to be here. And instead came at it on a more personal level, like, hey, let's sit down. What's going on?
Yeah.
Sounds like that really connected with you on a different level of just coach athlete relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he has become one of the most important people um that I've ever met. And I'm just so appreciative of him. And I still talk to him all the time. I'm always bugging him about something. And I don't know how many hours I spent in his office, but it was a lot. It was a lot of hours. And I'm so grateful for the time that we shared, and the impact that he had on me. It's really been it'll be a forever thing for sure.
End up getting an English degree. We know you go into to coach track. Did you get the English
Yes.
degree?
Yep. Graduated with a degree in English Lit and a minor
Wow.
in coaching of science. So that was once I got like halfway through my undergrad. I know there's again there's a lot of opposing themes here, but yeah. So I ended up doing the coaching of science minor, which was really great. And the human performance program at Eau Claire is phenomenal. And so being able to at least get a minor in that. If I went back, like if I could do it over, I would just do human performance from the get-go, knowing, you know, the where my life would kind of gravitate towards. But yeah, I had a great experience. And then I was volunteer coaching for a couple of years at Eau Claire. I was still training post-collegiate too, so came off a big 5th year, and really decided I wanted to stay in Eau Claire and keep training. And that's where I kind of went next.
So as an English lit major, you got to give us like, what's your favorite literature? I guess that's the best way to ask it.
Oh God,
Book,
I
yeah,
love,
yeah, work,
yeah,
yeah.
like I was really big into poetry and like the romantics and things like that. So yeah, we did a lot, like we read a lot as kids. And I really got into poetry and those kinds of things. Walt Whitman is probably my favorite. So yeah.
They say Renaissance man. It sounds like we have Renaissance woman. We have a
Yes,
English
yep,
lit
yes.
reading Walt Whitman, and then also going to the long jump pit.
Right, yeah. Like I said, a lot of duality around here. So I like to, you know, not pigeonhole myself, and just try to be um experience everything as much as I can.
Yeah, I love that. That's we surface level a lot of track coaches out there. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
so and so is a great hurdle coach, and so is a great distance coach. And it's like, oh yeah, there's layer. That's one role that they play. I like to peel that onion and find out that Dave
Yeah.
Smith, the head coach of Oklahoma State, he has a PhD. It's like, oh, I had no clue. Like that's a lot of. I mean, academic world. That's a lot of academics. You did that. I love peeling that onion and finding out. Yeah, Carly's also an English lit major and likes Walt Whitman. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So you're going to coach track. You continue on doing some training and volunteer coaching at Eau Claire. What did you think, or what was your mindset in regards to full-time, get a paid position? Was it, you going to go GA route? Are you waiting around for a position open at Eau Claire? What are you thinking there as you're going through those volunteer years?
Yeah, so Chip really did steer me into coaching track. Like I need to give credit where credit is due. He really was the first person that was kind of like, you could like do this all the time. Like you could do this full time. You don't have to do it half time.
That's interesting to me,
Yeah.
because sometimes, a lot of times, the origin story for a lot of coaches is, we usually we're athletes, so coaching is happening to us. Go lift this, go throw that, run this, etc. And there's usually, it's not always a light switch of just a straight off and on. Sometimes it's a slider button. It's the realization starts coming around of like, oh, wait a minute. Like I could actually do that. It's kind of funny because that example's right there in front of you. It's happening to, your either your high school coach or college coach is right there. And then
Yeah.
we don't realize like, oh, wait a minute, that guy or girl has a career. Well, maybe that could be my career. So you were thinking part-time in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher who coaches.
Yes.
Chip is kind of in your face about like, hey, you know what? You could actually be a coach.
Yeah. He's like, I think, Carly, I think you could be really good at this if you decide that you want to do this. And I basically was like, okay. And good thing I listened, right? But yeah, so I just I always knew I was going to coach on some level, but like I
Right.
said, like I was like, I cannot overstate how obsessed I was with track, how obsessed I was with Eau Claire, how obsessed I was with the entire experience and my coaches and my team. And like I would have like bled blue, basically, like if you had cut me open. And I didn't want to give that up. And I thought that getting into coaching and coaching track specifically would allow me to stay close to the thing that I loved more than anything in the world.
Sometimes I'm concerned with the word obsessed, right?
Yep.
Even with, I'm married and I'm obsessed with my wife, but it's got to look in a healthy way. What did that look like for you being obsessed with track, obsessed with Eau Claire track, bleeding blue? I love that because I love allegiance to your alma mater. That's where you went to school. I love that.
Yeah.
How did that play out? What did that look like that you were obsessed with track?
I agree with the word obsessed not being a good word, and yet I will still use it to describe kind of what my mindset was at that time. I would say obsessed for me was I made time and thought of essentially nothing else for like the last 3 years that I was there. And so for me, like it was never an unhealthy, I wasn't doing anything that was hurting myself or others or anything like that. But I just didn't care about anything else. And that's another piece that like people, we go back to that, where does that extra 20% thing come from? Um, I think that's something that we miss when we watch really great people, like the really great track athletes or any athlete on TV. Like you don't understand like the things that they've given up and the things that they have to pass on, or the things that they say no to. The amount of things that like you have to say no to in order to say yes to the thing you actually want to say yes to. I think that is really how I would describe my obsession, like when I was at Eau Claire. And just like I am so obsessed with um self-improvement, because I just feel like I can always get better. And in a stopwatch sport like track, that's a pretty good mentality to have. It ends up being pretty beneficial. And so for me, I was just obsessed with how to get better. And I mean, that was part of what I got my minor in coaching because it taught me more about my body and taught me more about track and taught me more about nutrition. And in turn, I would take that and be a better athlete. And so I think I was just devouring anything that would make me better.
I get the picture of you daydreaming in biology 101, drawing a stick figure of what it looks like to come off the takeoff board, being in a group of friends and they're talking about the latest concert or TV show, and you find some way to interject. Yeah, but did you see Tyson Gay versus Justin Gatlin the other night on the Diamond League? That's kind of the picture I get of you. Like it's always like, hey, Carly, yeah, we get it. You love track, and you're like, yes, I'm going to continue that.
Yeah, and I think and Chip really fed that. Like, he was really like grooming me to coach. Like even like as a sophomore, and then especially really starting like that like I was there for 5 years, so like that third year, like I would be in on recruiting visits. I would be in his office. Like I don't literally, I probably owe him rent money for how much time I spent in his office. But he really took me under his wing in terms of coaching and guiding. And talking to me about training and talking about strength conditioning and talking about recruiting and all these different things, and then being able to be to join for some of that stuff. And we got to the point that, you know, we're doing recruiting visits, and I got really comfortable with it. And he had a family emergency, like, gosh, I think this was maybe my fourth year, and he couldn't make a big recruiting visit. And he didn't tell me how many people were present on this recruiting visit. He just called me. He's like, Carly, can you take the visit? And I was like, sure, whatever. And so in walk like 8 people, you know, and I'm 21 maybe at the time, and did a whole recruiting visit. And Chip bought me dinner. We were going out of town for it was nationals for cross country. So we're all getting in the vans I went with, and he's like, Carly, I got your dinner tonight, so thank you for helping me out. That's a true story. And so yeah, I just Chip really did a great job of giving me the opportunity to really start coaching in a lot of ways, and start viewing myself that way, even when I was still an athlete, which is pretty unique.
A lot of trust there.
Oh yeah, a lot of trust.
Yeah. But both ways.
Yeah, I would be pretty nervous having one of my current student athletes maybe do a recruiting visit. Although I got a couple that I would trust. So
So we introduced you as the head strength and conditioning coach there at Parkside. We're going to get to that, so no spoiler alerts in regards to that. But where are you from high school through graduation, and even, let's stop there, through graduation from Eau Claire? Where is the weight room for you? Are you, there's been a lot of, we're still battling women and girls in the weight room versus guys in football, et cetera, today in 2023, which boggles me. Back when I was in high school, no of our girls athletes ever lifted. I don't think it was because they didn't want to. In fact, I know it wasn't because they wanted to. It was just, the football team lifts, and that was really all it was at that point. Where were you in regards to, were you a weightlifting gym rat, or was it still like, nah, we just didn't do it because I hate to say because we were girls, but because we were girls?
Yeah. Well, so remember how I said earlier about like it felt like I was like one of 5 girls on the team that like really cared. I was one of 2 that were in the weight room.
Okay.
So I lifted like pretty much every day after track practice. Now I had no program. I just went in there and I did the machines, and I just kind of made it up as I went along. And it was really like the last 2 years, like I didn't really lift a lot in high school. Basically the last maybe year, maybe 2 years that I was running track in high school still. So not a lot of weight room experience. I remember our women's softball coach, he was a Marine, really, really awesome dude. And I remember him teaching me how to hang clean when I was like a senior in high school, maybe. And that was my first introduction, right? I could like barely hold the bar.
Sure.
And so there wasn't a lot of really cleaning going on. It was more just struggling and trying to not get pinned on the floor by the bar. And then when I got to college, the culture was really good. And I remember our senior women being like, all right, we're going to the weight room. I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to do anything except like barely clean and walk around from machine to machine. And, at the time, Eau Claire didn't have a strength conditioning coach. So we had a program that was written by somebody that was certified, but it was kind of like, here you go, figure it out. And that is something that has really stuck with me through all of my coaching now, especially like being in the weight room. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm really in the camp of less is more when it comes to coaching and cueing and things like that. Like the value of figuring it out is so huge, especially in this day and age where you can have answers as quickly as you can pull up Google on your phone. So I think being able to allow, I think I really grew a lot from that experience, and being able to just like having to take ownership and going in there by yourself. Well, with your team, but your coaches aren't there. They don't know if you're showing up or not. Right. And that, basically that opportunity for maturity and ownership and accountability was huge.
There's a certain segment of our listening audience that are young high school, college female athletes. And certainly there's a large section of our listening audience that are coaches who coach young girls and women in track and field. Without putting words in your mouth, so this might not be your experience, I'm curious, what would you say to people who, we still have these, just ridiculous myths, not even myths, whatever, like just wrong. They're wrongs. They're non-truths of if you're a female lifting weights, you're going to look like a guy. Girls don't lift. That's the guy's thing to do. How did you, again, I'm doing a lot of assumptions here. So you push back where if this was not your experience, how did you get over the being one of the only girls in the weight room? How did you get over the feelings of like, oh, if I lift, I'm going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger again, which is crazy, by the way, but that's still permeated today. How did you get over that? And what advice would you give young women today, and maybe more appropriately, because we have more of this, coaches who coach women who want them in the weight room because it's the right thing to do? How do we help them coach our young women athletes that the weight room not only is good, it's great, it's good for you, not only just for track, just in general health?
Yeah. So I'm a bit unique in this perspective because I, like, to a fault, I really don't care what other people think.
Okay.
To a fault.
There's lesson number one for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Like, it's really genuine. Like, I really trust myself, and I trust the decisions that I make, and I trust my intentions, and I know that I'm a good person, and I really try to lead with that in everything. So I didn't even notice that I was the only girl in the weight room when I was in high school.
Even as a 16-year-old, I remember myself at 16-year-olds. Let me tell you what I'm a confident person now. I will not say I was confident as a 16-year-old. Even as 16-year-olds, you had some self-confidence there of like, I really don't care what you think.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying before about, like, really that obsession with track really started like that, like I'm 17, 18, which is about when I started to go in the weight room. So I didn't give a about what people thought about me being in there because it was going to make me better at track. So I didn't care. And also I was like a tiny string bean. And so it really, like, people, I think the big thing is when I get that question about, like, oh, like, women in the weight room are working out and getting bulky, and all those conversations, my usual first thing I say is, you don't eat enough to get bulky. Because even, like, I would say 90% of my my male collegiate student athletes are not eating enough to put on muscle. And so that's really where I start the conversation is, let's reframe it, because it's really lifting and being in the weight room is just one piece of how your body really changes. And it's the whole kind of 80-20 mindset, and that's where I try to start. But I think for me, and one really cool thing that I've seen changing now, and this has been a really good thing from social media, is the body positivity that has come from women who lift and women who have muscles, and all the kind of the hype that's come around that has been really, really cool to see. And, like, the amount of women that I see now that are coming into the weight room, and, like, they're doing deadlifts and they're doing RDLs and they're bench pressing, right? They're not on the elliptical for 2 hours, right? Like, they're doing what I call all the big girl lifts, and they should be, because those are the ones that are really going to give you the most benefit, and most bang for your buck over the long term, is doing those big basic movements. Whether you're an athlete or you're just a general population, you just want to be fit and, like, look good in your swimsuit kind of stuff, because that's certainly valid too. I think has been really, really cool to see that shift.
Awesome. Love that. Appreciate that. So let's keep moving forward. You're volunteer coaching at Eau Claire. Chip is like, hey, this is like, you should be full-time at this. And he's been harping on you for a while now on this. You're running recruiting trips, and, or I should say visits and stuff like that. That's amazing. Again, the reciprocal trust, that's unbelievable. That's really, really awesome to hear and see. What was the next step as far as getting into the career side of it?
Yeah. So like I was kind of mentioning before, I came off my 5th year at Eau Claire and had a really, really big year, and was running really fast and running fast enough to start getting into some pro meets and stuff. And so I decided I was going to stay in Eau Claire and keep training. And the goal was, because I think not that next summer, but the following summer was the Olympic trials.
Hmm.
So we start having conversations. Okay, it takes, 11 at that time. The B standard was, I think, 11:44 in the 100. I had run 11:62, and so we're like, Chip's like, yeah, Carly, you gotta keep on keeping on here a little bit longer, and see how it goes. And then so I trained really hard for that year. I got to go to a bunch of really cool meets, and went out to the Jim Bush invite, and watched Allison Felix run, like, oh my God, I don't even remember what she ran, like 50, 51, 50 point in a stadium with like 10 people in it. Okay. It was like all the pros, and yeah, I just got to go to a lot of really, really cool big meets where it's, all international people running. And like I remember this was one of my last like big races that I ran in. I ran the 200 and kind of tweaked my hamstring, and I was super mad. And I was never someone that, like, it was always hard to tell if I was like mad about how a race was and things like that. I typically was very composed. But after this race, I was so mad. We were in, I think this was the Jim Bush meet. And I'm like pouting off to the side of the track, and I'm just like, God, I flew all the way out here and I just ran like crap and whatever. So I'm all in my feels. And all of a sudden I hear this man behind me, and he goes, "Excuse me, miss." And I turn around, and it's Tyson Gay. He's like, "Would you mind holding my blocks?" And I was like, "Sure." So I, go and I hold, former American record holders blocks. And he was so sweet, so polite, so appreciative. And it just really I kind of turned it around for me. And so, yeah, I just got to have some really, really phenomenal experiences that first year that I was kind of out. And then I really, like, after that meet, I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm ready to get into coaching. And something I've told people a lot is, like, I was a really good athlete. And I think after that meet, I really decided, and now my goal is to be a better coach than I was an athlete. So setting that standard was kind of that next step for me.
So first, cosign that Tyson Gay is a really great person. I recruited him out of high school, so love him to death. I still think of him as a kid because I recruited him as a 17-year-old. It's like, oh no, he's a full-fledged adult dad.
He
It's
was
amazing.
he was so soft spoken,
Yeah,
and like he like came up and thanked me after. Like I was just so impressed. I was so
yeah,
impressed by
yeah.
how he was with me.
He's a good dude. Second of all, holy cow, you ran 11:62.
Yeah.
That's fast. I mean, holy cow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I ran 11:62 in the 100 and 23:88 in the 2. And yeah, so I had fun at Eau Claire, man. I had a lot of
That
fun.
is awesome. Love that. So what was the first step
Yeah.
in after the volunteering? You have that experience of tweaking your hamstring, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, this maybe I've hit my limit as far as the athletic side. This coaching thing is still very much in front of me. So what was the next step there in the career?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just some more conversations with Chip about getting a little bit more serious, and trying to work with um, more specific groups. I was just kind of more generally helping out, like that the first year out of school, because I was still training and all that. And then that second year, I had kind of asked Chip, I'm like, "Hey, I wanna shadow you during hurdle practice, and I wanna work with the long sprint group a little bit more, because I know your 100, 200 training like the back of my hand, right?
Hmm.
But I wanna understand some of the longer stuff." Specifically our 800 group, and then hurdles were the two things that I had kind of asked him to start being around for a little bit more, and having conversations, and just asking lots of questions on that. And that's really where the next year kind of went.
So
So
I hear the obsession part, not just like I'm going to be this super deep, knowledgeable 100, 200 meter coach. I'm going to learn the hurdles. I'm going to learn the 800. I'm going to learn the 400. I see that obsession start playing out in a very healthy respect of like, oh, okay, I'm going to learn as much as I can of all the events, not just this one or two events here. So we can't be a volunteer forever. When did we actually get a job, or was there a GA position? What was after the continual learning from Chip? I mean, boy, Chip, I should have just had you on the podcast here, my friend, because she's giving your history out, because I know you're listening. History here, bravo. By the way, shout out to Chip, because this is a great example of the positive impact coaches make on young people every day around the country. So just love Chip living out that really that creative coaching of uplifting young people and showing them that they can be anything that they want to put 110% to, but then you got to learn what 110% really is. So shout out to Chip over there at Eau Claire. All right, we can't volunteer forever. What are we doing?
you're right. Can't volunteer forever. Eventually, I have to move out of Eau Claire after 7 years there. So 5 as a student athlete, and then one training, and then one, much more seriously volunteer coaching. And then I got a graduate assistant position at Southwest Minnesota State, so out in Marshall, Minnesota. If you've ever been there, it probably didn't take you very long to drive through it. And yeah, I had that was a really interesting, really learning heavy experience for me. We had our head coach was a cross country distance guy, and we had a couple of other GAs, and my head coach basically said, here you go, GAs, here's the sprints, jumps, hurdles group, write all the training, do all the things. And so, man, the three of us sat in our offices every Monday morning for that entire year, talking about training and arguing and just getting better, right? And so I remember a lot of those conversations that we had. So shout out to Eric and Connor for all those conversations we had back in the day. So
what did you end up majoring in for your grad work?
So it was a master's of science in coaching education.
Yeah.
So it was it's a really unique program because it was like half like athletic administration and then half exercise science. So it was a really like perfect fit for me in terms of being able to have a little bit deeper dive into the exercise science stuff that I'd already kind of do in my minor at Eau Claire, but then being able to get some of the sports management type of stuff that I wasn't as familiar with was really cool. So for me, it ended up being a perfect fit.
What you described there of this, I'm gonna call it the three-headed monster, these three GAs. I can visualize this, the huddle, and like, all right, what are we gonna do this week? Well, and you're dealing with three unique backgrounds, right? One person, I have no clue, Eric and Connor, but one of them could have been like, yeah, I'm just doing grad work because I'm going to go become a professor. I'm going to go start a business, whatever. Maybe the other one was like, yeah, I'm going to be a track coach. But they all came from different training backgrounds and different coaching education backgrounds at that point. So I can see there being some really good discussions. And I was going to say heated, and that heated sometimes is good because you're having debate and you're having to defend. Well, I think we should be doing this with our people because blah, 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 blah. And then they come back and say, well, here's what I think. And you go, oh, well, that actually kind of makes sense too. How do we blend the two? And this is very common. Now, in this example, we're given it's 3 GAs, but this is common all the way up to the Power 5. Just because you might have a sprint coach and a jump coach, et cetera, multis are in there, and you have multi-event athletes, meaning someone's a long jumper and a triple jumper. And so those two coaches have to figure out the right path to move forward for the betterment of the athlete. So this happens all around the country in every track and field program. How did you three, I mean, you're young kids, even if you're in GA, you're still young kids here. How did y'all work it out? And what maybe outside resources did I know you probably have Chip on speed dial, and maybe they had their own Chip on speed dial, but was there any formal education like USATF level 1? Was there, conference meet? You went up to the full-time coach at another conference, was like, hey man, how did you do that? You just won the long jump title. How did you do that? So we can figure out on our own. And how did you make it work?
Yeah, I think so the other two guys, one was a hurdler and the other one was a multi. And the multi was coached by Marissa Chu. So he had a pretty good upbringing in terms of the multi and how to to train that
Mhm.
properly. And so we had some like chops to some of the mentors that we would be able to
Right.
call and reach out to. And I think part of that, and knowing that we all came from really good programs, um the other Eric ran the hurdles at Black Hill State. So another really good program. And so I think there was a lot of trust there, honestly, from the beginning. And I think we weren't afraid to hurt each other's feelings,
Mm.
which I think is big. And part of that's just being young a little bit too. And I think we all wanted to be really good. And I think we did a good job of being open-minded. And I think even now, like when I'm writing training, or I'm talking to coaches, whether it's like someone within our track staff or even one of our sport coaches, I think I really try to always leave an opportunity to learn something and to try something new. And I think that's really important. And I think the three of us did a good job of not being afraid to fail. Because there's a lot of ways to like skin a cat, right? And I think we were not afraid to try some things with the group that we had. So I think it was just probably young, unearned courage, maybe, and just good friendship too. That helps.
To have debate and discussion and conflict, we a lot of times we tend to shy away from conflict. It's like, oh, if I want to be friendly with Carly, I won't present any kind of conflict, whether that's, anything that you're sorry, this is going to sound terrible, Carly. Your breath is not stinky. I don't think you're holding your part of the bargain of the work, et cetera, et cetera. And we
Yeah.
think we're doing it as like, oh, I'm being friendly to Carly, but not creating the conflict. And actually, what you're really saying is like, I don't have trust in Carly that if I present this issue, that we'll be able to work it out and move forward. That's what it's really a non-trust thing to not have healthy conflict. It sounds like you mentioned trust in there with those two, that you had good backgrounds. You felt like you could trust each other. Therefore you could, I hate to say call out the other person, but say, hey, I disagree with this. Let's hash this out. Let's talk it out. There's trust involved in that.
Yeah, and I think too, like because we all had specialties that were just a little bit different,
Hmm.
and Eric with the hurdles and Connor with the jumps and me with the sprints. I think we kind of let each of like our three-headed monster lead in those areas, and then allow the other two to sort of lead to learn and follow their lead, depending on what we were doing that day or and things like that. And so we just really we were really lucky that we worked as well together as we did. So
Was the head coach male or female?
male. I
How
was the
do
only female on staff.
Yeah, that's where I'm
Okay.
going.
Yeah.
In the coaching world, pardon me, and I want to be very specific on the college coaching world because I don't know the high school teaching world in coaching track and field as well. I don't see them as often, but in college I see all the time. I'm at every NCAA championships. I host this podcast, etc. There's no official. I guess there probably is official stats somewhere, but unofficially, there's maybe 10% of our coaching body is women.
Mm.
Maybe. Our coaching athletes are roughly split 50-50, by the way. There's roughly 50% males, 50% female athletes. However, when we go into the coaching world, that shrinks down tremendously.
Yeah.
It bears all the way through, which is really interesting to me. Like when I look at our statistics of listeners of the podcast, it is roughly the same. It's 10 to 15% are female versus the rest male. Now, however, what's interesting is when you look at our top, say, 10 podcast, I think it's 5 of them, so 50% are the women guests. Now, I don't know if that's because there's curiosity of like, well, I've never seen a Carly in the wild. Maybe I should learn with her, So I don't know if
It
it's
is a bit scary. Yeah. Yeah.
sure. So how, up to this point, at least, and then you're still very, very early in your career, you're in your grad work here. You've done some volunteer coaching, but you've been around, you've seen other coaches, and you've seen, 90% male, et cetera. And here you are again. I kind of have this picture of you three in an office, maybe the size of the studio here. So very small quarters. Head coach is a male. You're coaching 50% males on the team. You have these 2 male GAs. You're the only female there. I assume in the athletic department staff, again, probably maybe 10 to 15% are women. How are you I don't even know how to ask this question, because I don't want to ask it in a bad way, in the sense of like, how are you getting over that? There's nothing to get over, but how are you? Maybe the question is, how are you dealing with that? Are there insecurity issues? Are there loneliness issues? You don't necessarily have other women to talk with about things. How are you? I don't know. It's a terrible question. I don't know how to end that.
No,
Handling
no,
dealing with it.
it's a good question.
How,
I
how,
think,
how are you overcoming being a woman, Carly?
yeah, right. I know. That's it
What's
could be
going to
a tricky.
soundbite that and get me in trouble?
Right. Yeah, someone is going, I know you said you don't really edit these, so they're
Yeah.
authentic, but I'm taking that part and I'm posting it.
Okay.
But no, I think it's a really good question. And it's the time frame of when you're asking about that
Hmm.
at that time being a GA, I think is really interesting because one, I'm coming off of frankly, like a big college career, and my accomplishments as an athlete really bought a lot of respect
Hmm.
for me when I was a GA. So even though I was young,
And that's a good and a bad thing, right? And what I
it
say that
is.
is, not
Yeah.
everybody's going to run 11.6, right? The majority of
Right.
us are going to run 12.6 and 13.6, for crying out loud. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't be because you ran 11.6 that I give you respect.
Yeah.
It should be
Yep.
because you're a person, I give you respect. So, okay, I just want to interject that. Like, I love that happened to you, but it shouldn't be
Yeah.
that way. I love that was part of it, though. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. And so I think it gives you instant credibility. It's certainly not, I'm the first person to say that like being a really good athlete does not mean you're going to be a really good coach. And usually it's pretty challenging for good athletes to be good coaches because they don't understand why things don't come as naturally to their athletes as it did to them.
Interesting.
And that's just kind of my personal philosophy on it.
That's
Now,
interesting.
there's certainly exceptions to the rule. I hope that I'm an exception to that rule in terms of the way that I coach now, and I think the patience and the true teaching that I try to do overcomes that. But so I think walking in as a GA, it gave me instant credibility, especially being young. I mean, I was 24, right? And you're only a few years older than the athletes that
Mhm.
you're coaching, and especially being like small town Minnesota, um, pretty conservative, and like I had a lot of really challenging situations when I was there. But I think being able to have the confidence of, like I was saying before, I don't really care what other people think, and that has come in handy quite a lot. And two, walking in with some like real credible experiences
Hmm.
in track and all of that really helped me to kind of find my footing when I became a GA. But it was really challenging. Like I mean I had two male student athletes asked to have a meeting with me because they weren't happy with how things were going, and one of them like literally told me to my face that he wasn't used to women being in a position of authority, so he didn't really trust me. And that was a very eye-opening conversation for me to have at 24 with this young. I'm like, who the hell are you? And like, but it was really important for me to have some of those conversations. And now like one of those guys I talk to all the time. Him and I are really close, and that was the beginning of a good relationship. But it took a bad conversation first in order to get there.
Was that a bad conversation? Because, not knowing the full context, of course,
Sure.
he was probably not, he was probably right. He was right, in the sense of he hadn't probably up to
Yeah.
that point had any track coaches that were women. Now,
Yeah.
where I kind of hear the fault, maybe again not having context, is when, if he says, I'm not used to having women in authority positions. Like, okay, well, I have to bet your teachers, there were some women there and they had authority over you. You maybe had a mom or some kind of mom figure, that person maybe had authority of you. But I can see in the track coach sense of like, okay, maybe this is his first time he's had a woman coaching. And I do like the idea that he came to talk to you, though, right? A lot of them will hide, stay in the back and
Yeah.
just vent. I like that you had the opportunity to say, okay, you know what? What are you afraid of? What's different
Yes.
between me and a male coach in that sense?
Yeah, yep, I totally agree with that. It was I wouldn't say it was a bad conversation, but it was a difficult conversation.
For sure.
And I will say with this particular case for one of the individuals, like he flat out said like he didn't trust me because I was a woman.
Mm.
And so that was the part that was like, how do I respond
I was
to
gonna say, how do
that
you
as
respond to
a,
that?
like how to, I'm like, okay, what can I do? And that was one of the times I called Chip. I'm like,
Mm,
Chip, right? I'm like all upset. I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, you do the job. You do
mm,
the job and you keep doing the job.
mm,
And if people respond to that, great. If they don't, it's fine. And it's been such good advice, right?
mm.
Because we've all had athletes that like we just don't connect with, and they, some like they quit, or they make other, decisions, and they walk away from the team for this reason or the other. And then sometimes they come back. I literally just over the weekend, we had a alumni event here at Parkside, and a guy that didn't actually graduate came to alumni, and him and I had a conversation, and he's like, "You were right. This is someone that walked away from the team because he wanted to like start his real life, right? Like working and internships and all this stuff, and he just like walked away from track."
Mm.
He's like, "I told you at the time, like I didn't have time for track anymore." And he's like, "And I just miss it so much that I'm running your workouts at 4 a.m. in the morning right now before I go to work." He's
Oh
like, "So I want you
man.
to know, like you were right, and I wish I would have done things differently."
Wow.
So that's the flip side to difficult conversations. Is sometimes it's an opportunity for reconnection later down the road. But yeah, it man, there's been some challenging conversations around just yeah, like what we were talking about in terms of being a female coach.
I mean,
So
how many great stories? We don't go to the movies to watch the story of the kid who's bought in 100% and their coach has bought in 100%. And so they go copacetic and win the state title or the national title. We go to watch movies of the stories of redemption and change, right? So a boy athlete, a male athlete who says, "I'll never have a female coach," makes bad
yeah,
decisions because of that, maybe has a difficult conversation and then learns, "Oh, wow, wait a minute. These were unfounded thoughts on my part," and then they go on to win the title. We always want to see the movie end on a good note, right? So again,
right.
I like that challenge, that conflict. He had to have conflict to come to you and say that, and then thank goodness you had the right attitude and leadership and mentorship from people like Chip of being able to say, "Hey, man, I'm a coach." First and foremost, before I'm a male or female on that track, we're going to keep moving forward because I believe in what I do and what I've learned and the people that have poured into me. So, and I think that helped that person. I bet today they have a female boss or have had a female boss and have been okay with it, like we should, by the way, because it's like, you know what, Coach Fehler, I thought there was a problem with her too, and you know what, that worked out pretty good, and therefore it can work
Yep.
out in the future. So I love that. All right, so 2 years at Southwest Minnesota, is that right?
Yep, I was only there for a year actually. So I
One
was
year.
there as just a GA for a year, and then the job at Parkside opened up, and so I got hired at Parkside in 2018, and
Yeah.
here we are 6 years later. So
Wow. So what,
yeah,
and I don't
almost six
know
years.
very much. I know where Madison is, right? I
Yeah,
know where Milwaukee is. You
yeah.
told me where you grew up. Where is Eau Claire? Where is Parkside? Where are we at? We don't do the mitten, right? That's Michigan. How do we
You're right.
get?
That's more Michigan. Yep. But so Eau Claire is like an hour and a half east of the Twin Cities.
Of Minnesota. Okay. So you're west of
Yep.
Madison,
Yep, way northwest of Madison.
northwest. Got it. Okay.
Yep, northwest of Madison. And then Parkside is located in Kenosha, which is literally directly in the middle of Milwaukee and Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say that's over here by
So,
the Chicago area.
yep,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
yep,
All right. Got it. Got
yep.
it. Got it. Yeah. So you're back home.
Yeah, I'm back home. My
Yeah.
family loves it. Yeah, I mean,
Very cool.
yeah, and that's really why probably the biggest reason that I left after 1 year as a GA was, like you don't get a lot of opportunities to come home in college athletics. And so being able to have that opportunity
For sure.
right away when I was just kind of starting out was really a sweet opportunity for me, and I've been here ever since.
I have no dog in this fight, but I know people are going to wonder because where you grew up is really unique. Are you Packers or Bears?
Oh God, no, it's Packers. Listen,
Okay, but you said God
yeah,
no.
no,
You're like
it's
it's
not.
faster for you to get to the Bear Stadium than it is the. the Packers. Don't say for sure.
Okay, you're not wrong. You're not wrong on that. It is faster for me to but we have Brett Favre.
True.
Okay. We had Brett Favre when I was growing up. That's my all-time favorite athlete is Brett Favre. So like,
I hope I'm not,
why would you cheer for the Bears? Like, why would you do that? Especially during that time.
I hope I'm not going to break down this idol of Brett Favre.
You opened a can of worms here.
You know, Favre is not a really good guy, right?
Yes, I do know that.
Okay. All right. That's all. That's okay. Just as long as you know what's going on and what he's done and doing, allegedly.
I was gonna say allegedly,
but for sure he did it. Yeah.
What I loved about Favre was how he played the game and the passion that he had, the joy and fun that he had, and so that is why he was my my favorite athlete as a kid. Are you kidding? Every kid in Wisconsin, that was their favorite athlete growing up.
And it's hilarious that I'm even involved in this conversation because I literally watch 0 NFL games. I grew up in Alabama. Okay. It's all about Saturday college football for me. Sunday's my day off. So
fair enough.
Yeah. But I know people are like, well, wait a minute, she's right there. And so I had to ask the question. Okay. Where are we at? So you're at Parkside now and track and field. Because I know, again, we introduced you as the head strength and conditioning coach. We're going to get into that. But this is a track and field position for the track and field team.
Yes.
Yep. And you're full time. This is your first full time gig. You're official.
Yeah. I've officially made it. So first full time coaching gig was here at Parkside. I got hired as the assistant cross country and track and field coach, and so that was my role and my title for 2 years, and then I got promoted to associate head track coach when Nick Moss got here. And then 2 years after that, I pivoted and went head strength conditioning route with some assistant work kind of in that vein too. So I joke all the time. I keep tricking everyone at Parkside into all my harebrained ideas and all the changes and things like that. And but like, I mean, for someone to really, Parkside has always found a way to tell me yes, and has really given me the opportunity and the space to grow and try new things. And so I've had a really great experience here at Parkside.
So shout out to Nick Moss, by the way. I love him. Most of my love goes for people who are active on Twitter. Just throwing it out there. So love Nick and what he does there. So let's talk about this development through Parkside. So 4 years there as the full-time assistant coach, associate head coach, and then now this strength and conditioning. So let's talk about leading up to the strength and conditioning director position. As you're going through these 4 years of coaching, so you're coaching. I mean, we all, every one of us listening right now knows the ins and outs of what coaching college track and field's about. You're recruiting, you're coaching your kids, you're continually learning. I'm sure you're still leaning on Chip. Chip, what would you do here, et cetera, those kind of things. Heck, probably at this point, maybe a couple of years into Parkside, Chip's maybe asking you questions of like, hey, how did you handle that? Because Chip's the kind of guy who's always going to be continually learning as well. Where is, because we know you end up as the director of S&C there. Where is the weight room? Like, I feel like there has to be some evolution of like you got more and more, I don't want to say serious about the weight room, but maybe more and more educated and passionate and involved. Yes. Walk through that progression.
Yeah. So I realized I didn't answer your question from before. So when I was a GA, but when I was still a volunteer coach, I did the USATF level 1 when I was a volunteer coach at Eau Claire. Then I did my USTF CCCA level 1 when I was a GA. And then the summer that I got hired at Parkside is when I did my USTF CCCA in strength conditioning, and Carrie Lane and Boo taught it. And I swear, I tell people this all the time, I learned more in that 2-day class than I have learned in any other setting in my life. So if you're thinking about, shout out to Boo and Carrie, because they 100%. Were incredible. I was on the edge of my seat for 2 days.
And quick shout out to both of them. Maybe this says something about the podcast. Both of them are Gill podcast alums as well. So Boo has been on the show. He's amazing. That was my mentor. Love him to death. And Carrie, she's just an awesome human being, first of all, but an she is an awesome coach, an unbelievable human being, honestly. So I love that she was part of that teaching. Of course she was, because she's awesome. She's a great teacher as well. So also has been on the podcast. So go check out those 2 episodes. So you obviously see the correlation, and you express this in your athletic career as well, of the weight room to the track and vice versa. So now you're getting more involved on the coaching side of it. So are you staying those first 4 years before you actually get the full-time
Yeah.
title?
Yeah.
You're starting to write workouts for the track team, or your group at
Yeah.
least, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so it really started when I was in grad school. So I actually
Mm,
I think I might have got my timeline wrong. I think I did the S&C certification right before I went to grad school because I was writing all of our strength conditioning for sprints, jumps, and cross country
mm,
when I was a GA. And then that spring, I started to help out with women's basketball and softball
mm,
a little bit. So we had a really good strength conditioning coach that was there at the time, and he really kind of let me hang out and like talk shop a little bit, and just really kind of let me be way more hands-on than most people would let a GA do.
mm,
But he wasn't really familiar with track, so that's why I ended up doing all the programming for strength conditioning for us when I was a GA. So really, this kind of started like back in 20, what would that been? 2016, 20,
mm-hmm,
no, 2017.
mm-hmm,
And then when I got to Parkside, I did all of well, so we had a strength conditioning coach at the time, who didn't really like they weren't super present with the track and cross country team. And so about halfway through the year, we kind of made the decision as a staff that we wanted me to start to take that over and start doing the programming for that. And I've been doing it ever since. So I really started kind of that first year at Parkside doing the strength and conditioning for cross country and track. And then a few years ago, that person left, and then we had an interim who's actually a good friend of mine, and I was helping her out, and I essentially got like a stipend to be the assistant. So I joke all the time that like I had two full-time jobs because I kind of did that. I was associate head coach for track, but then I was doing all the strength conditioning for men's and women's cross country and track and women's basketball.
mm,
So that's like you got men's cross, men's track, women's basketball.
mm-hmm.
That's 5 teams. That's more than a full-time S&C load at a lot of places,
Right.
right? And so it was kind of a unique opportunity to start getting my foot in that door because one thing I say all the time is track is the original strength and conditioning.
Mm.
And I just started to really lean into that. I would say especially that like third and fourth year that I was, still doing the track stuff, and started getting in helping out with the other sports. And really truly I having women's basketball really was the last nudge that I needed to kind of go into this direction because I just felt like I had a really unique opportunity to bring a track background into a setting that I can help more teams than just one.
How much of that nudging and moving towards the full-time S&C career came from, or earlier you said, I'm gonna paraphrase it, so correct me where appropriate. When you were working out, even back as a high schooler, you saw there wasn't a lot of structure and there wasn't a lot of, I'm gonna put the word in here, care towards lifting, and that bothered you. I remember you saying that bothered me. You didn't know, I don't think you were able to understand how it bothered you. You just knew that it was wrong. How much of that plays into this continual moving towards S&C, coming from a track and field background?
Oh, absolutely. I think I mean we struggled, to be honest, with the person that was in this position before me. And I I was watching I remember watching like men's basketball warm up, and I remember watching like soccer in the weight room, and I'm like, I should be writing that, I should be programming that, I should be leading that. This is not good enough, in my opinion. And so I think for me, I really like view coaching, especially my role now, as like a stewardship position. And that's one thing that like if you talk to my student athletes, I hope one thing that they will say is like, Carly genuinely deeply cares about this and us, right? She really cares about what she's doing and the impact that that has on us. Like that is what I hope every single student athlete that I have will say that like I really care about them. And so I just felt like it was just the bar was not high enough, and I felt like I could come in and raise it.
So I'm completely, totally biased. I think track and field coaches are the greatest people and the most multi-talented people in the world. And so I'm always very encouraging for track coaches to go into administrative roles, right? Athletic directors, facility directors, et cetera, because we need people who understand our sport and care about our sport in positions that make very big consequences for our sport, right? Whether they get cut,
Yeah.
whether they get added, how much they get funded. I would love for an athletic director to be a former track coach and understand the importance of track and field for the athletes, the school, and for the coaches. I've since this is a new topic, but I find myself like I'm also kind of very biased in that sense of like for strength and conditioning. I think I would love more track coaches to go into the strength and conditioning world. Why have you seen? Okay, so fast forward, you now become the director of strength and conditioning at Parkside. That final nudge of the women's basketball team, and then it's like, hey, what are we doing? We got the right person right here. Would us as
Yep.
an athletic department be better served if she's full time there? I'm gonna call it part time, volunteer side on the
Yep.
track side.
Yeah, for sure.
Why? It's a long time mystery, and it's a big generalization here because it's not everybody. But why do, in general, strength and conditioning coaches not understand the nuances of track? And I assume that means they're also not the nuances of soccer and softball and volleyball. It comes from a very football, bigger, faster, stronger mentality. And I add a caveat with that is I've met a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, and they're very intelligent people. These are not just,
Yeah.
stereotypically cavemen who say, I'm gonna make the sprint, the distance runners lift just like I make the football linemen sprint lift. They're very smart individuals, but they seem to stop their evolution of learning for other sports at football. Maybe basketball, maybe they'll add basketball to their individualization of how they train, but not a track for sure. Why do you think that is? Now that you're in the world, you're talking to way more strength and conditioning coaches today than you did, 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. I think first and foremost, I think most strength and conditioning coaches are intimidated by track coaches because, like I said earlier, track is the original strength and conditioning, right? People love watching the combine. Okay, if you like watching the combine, go to a track meet.
Mm.
What do you think that is? Where do you think that comes from? Right? So if you're in the business of making somebody jump higher, run faster, throw farther, whatever it is, like track coaches are strength and conditioning coaches.
Mm.
And this is something Nick Moss and I talk about all the time. And it surprises me now, kind of being on the other side of it, why there's not more track and field, former athletes or coaches or whatever that go into strength conditioning, because it's such an advantage. And I think that in my opinion, I think it's a huge advantage that I have a track and field background, because all of the trendy stuff right now about like baseball players, doing 10-meter flies, and football running the 40, and all of this hype around max velocity acceleration work. Like, congratulations, welcome to what every track coach has been doing for the last 30 years. So I think for me, that's like, so I think there's absolutely an intimidation factor for strength coaches trying to work with track coaches, because of the true physicality of track and the energy systems and all of those things. Like, they have a really deep understanding of the body in a way that like your other sport coaches don't have, right? They don't understand the anatomy and the exercise science. Most sport coaches, that's not their background, right?
Mm.
And so I think they're more peer-to-peer in a lot of ways. And I think that can be challenging for some strength coaches, because I think there's a little bit more pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. I've always said, track coach really should just be called a human performance coach, because you're just trying to make the human body do more to your point, the jumping, the sprinting, et cetera, how long we can
Yeah.
run, et cetera. Where, and again, big generalizations here, basketball coaches, baseball coaches, volleyball coaches are much more of the X's and O's experts.
Yep.
And so there's less like, those coaches, when they go to the weight room, they're like, yeah, I don't know. This is, I can tell you how to set a pick and hit a 3-pointer. That's all my basketball knowledge, by the way. But I can't tell you, should they be doing cleans or benches or RDLs, et cetera, where a track coach, I mean, I don't want to say the vast majority, but a good percentage have grown up like, okay, if I'm going to jump farther, well, I better be doing these things in the weight room, or if I'm going to sprint faster, I better be complimenting what I'm doing in the weight room. I've never heard it described the way you said. It's closer to a peer-to-peer relationship than some of our other sport coaches out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other piece too, when it comes to, again, being on the other side of the curtain now, the big thing for strength coaches, I think, especially in this day and age, I think a lot of coaches are doing microdosing, right? So you're doing the minimum effective amount of what you need in order to get the most benefits, right? All the research shows that that's the safest way to do things, right? From a programming perspective, and you keep kids, like, you keep the soccer team fresh. They don't feel sore. They just feel kind of good and ready to go. And but also doing our due diligence in trying to prevent injury and those kinds of things. The difference for track is you need every ounce of that orange squeezed out in order to PR, in order to qualify for nationals, in order to to make big progress for as a track athlete. For a certain like a certain group, once they get to a certain level of ability. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think that I think strength coaches are, so this is the other piece to your question. I think there's a lot of strength coaches that are afraid of doing too much, and track coaches will typically ask them to do more.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so based on the needs, because the way that, like, I describe track is an impulse sport, right? Like it happens that quick, right? Whether that is sprinting, whether it's throws, whether it's pole vault, whether it's pick any of the jumps you want. And the weight room transitions more to track and field than it does for any other sport, in my opinion. And so I think the programming for track and field in the weight room is way more, what's the word? It's just so critical. It's so critical. A basketball player can come in there and they can do a whole bunch of different kinds and styles of programming, and they're going to feel good and they're going to probably play well. But for track, like, if I have a thrower come in and he's never lifting over, right? Like, he's never going to 90% or higher, right? We're leaving a lot of opportunity and a lot of gains on the table. And so I think it's my long-winded answer of, I think, why there's some, not conflict, but just some, like, just the vibe sometimes there between strength and conditioning coaches and track, because track coaches know what they're doing and strength coaches know that they know what they're doing.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Every coach, it's not a 9-to-5 position. It's not a 40-hour-a-week position. Football coaches are, I give them props. They are continually watching film, breaking down the next opponent, what happened the previous game, things like that. Same with basketball coaches. Track coaches were generally on the track 8 to 8, 12 hours, not even counting the recruiting. Strength and conditioning coaches are very similar in my, again, I'm not paying attention to the SNC world, but just from my experience is another, like, you're on there all the time. Maybe someone out there is thinking about it. Maybe they, do the strength conditioning for their track team. And they're like, man, I've always thought about becoming a full-time strength and conditioning coach. Walk us through, what are some similarities? You've been a full-time coach, track coach. You're now a full-time strength and conditioning coach. What are some similarities in regards to timeframes and responsibilities? And what are any major differences that you've seen as well in this new position?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. I wouldn't say my day-to-day has changed a lot. I think the big thing is I have a lot less like paperwork and administrative kind of work that I do now because I'm not recruiting. I don't
Mhm.
have official visits, things like that. So it cleaned up a lot of like the kind of busy work that I do. But the caveat to that is sometimes I run, 7 practices a day, right? Depending on how many
Mhm.
teams I have in there, and kind of varies day to day. And I've got a graduate assistant who does a great job and helps me out. And he takes probably like 30 to 40% of our teams, and then I kind of have everybody else. And but so that means I could be on the floor coaching for like 6, 7 hours on some days. And so
Mhm.
that can get pretty challenging and fatiguing, especially right now. We're in the first couple of weeks of school, so I feel like I'm still getting my coaching feet under me a little bit. But I would say that's some of the biggest differences day to day. But there's I think a lot of differences in terms of like the calendar a little bit. And like I don't have to travel, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm not traveling for recruiting. I'm not traveling to go to cross country meets really anymore. I'll go to a couple. Like I all the teams that I'm with, I always tell them I will travel for championships if you would like me to be there, which is a little bit unique for Division 2. But that was something that I thought would be kind of fun and cool,
Mhm.
and it has been. So that's the big difference, is the weekend and the travel has been much more normal, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I like actually have the weekends open for parts of the year. And then obviously like when we get into season in the spring, I'm coaching with track and all that still. So I resume
Mhm.
my busy weekend calendar in the spring. But then, in the summer, more like it's more open, and you've got open hours, and athletes can come in and set up sessions with me and that kind of thing. But I would say the big thing is having evenings and weekends be open. So yeah, you're busy during the day, but like when you go home, you go home. And I think that is one of the biggest differences between coaching track and doing strength conditioning, is like I can kind of turn my brain off when I come home, where
Mhm.
like when it was track, like I was never not thinking about the team. So
I'm getting the sense Parkside does not have football.
we do not have football.
Okay.
You are correct.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yes.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about being a coach who happens to be a woman, and how a few there are in relationship to the percentage of athletes. I have to think the strength and conditioning world has less. I could be wrong. You correct me. I just have that feeling. How has it been transitioning into? Because I'm imagining like in the track world, I guess you don't have a strength and conditioning meet. Like in track meets, you go to track meets, but there has to still maybe be clinics and other professional groups and things like that. On Twitter world, you're probably more active in the strength and conditioning Twitter world than the normal track coach is involved in that. What are any similarities, complete
Yeah,
differences, welcoming, not welcoming?
yeah, I think it's pretty similar. And honestly, I think there's more women getting into coaching track now. I mean, like, so for perspective, when I first went to the USTF CCCA convention, it was 2017.
Mhm.
And I remember it was a record number of attendees. There were like 1,800 coaches or something that were there, and 75 of them were women. Fast forward, so I haven't gone in a couple of years, and then there's a COVID in there
Mhm.
too. But the last time that I went, I think it was like kind of around the same number of attendees, maybe like 1,800, but like 250 were women.
Yeah.
So that's better.
Yep.
Not good,
Right.
not good, but better.
Right.
And so I think it's pretty comparable. So I haven't gone to our national S&C convention yet. I'll do that next summer. But I think it's pretty comparable. And I, for lack of a better phrase, like I'm used to it a little bit, like maybe being one of only a couple women in the room. And I presented at our NSCA state clinic in the spring, And that was a lot of fun. And I was actually surprised by the number of women that were in attendance. And so I'd say it's similar. I think both fields are getting better, and it's starting to not be necessarily unique to have a woman on staff anymore, and those kinds of things. But it's definitely unique. I don't really know. Someone asked me this question recently: how many other female directors of strength and conditioning there are out there? I'm like, I don't know, but not very. I can tell you 0 are also coaching track. So,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's typically some frustration between the track coach and the strength coach, like we talked about earlier. Now that you have a very unique perspective to this world, being on both sides and still being on both sides, as far as still, having some coaching track and field duties, what would you recommend? What counsel would you give to a track coach who, for many, many reasons, some valid, maybe some not valid, honestly, is struggling with their S&C coach? What counsel recommendation would you give on how to talk to them, how to approach them, how to deal with what they see maybe as a frustration, a lack of track attention, maybe to the track team or cross country team?
Yeah, I think again, I'm super biased because I'm also on our track staff, right?
Right.
So I think one of the big things is just communication, which sounds really kind of silly. But I'm always big on trying to get everyone else to grow. And so whether that is, okay, let's say you were somewhere previously and the strength and conditioning coach was really good, and then you go to a new place and the next person doesn't seem to get track as well. Trying to get those two people connected is really helpful, to be like, okay, here's what we did there and here's what works really well.
The two
And
strength and conditioning coaches connected.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, be like, hey, like, give this person a call. It's an opportunity to make a connection, right? Networking and all of that, and being able to kind of bridge those gaps between people, and allow people to, make new friendships through that too, I think
mhm.
is really a good starting point.
I like that.
And I think if an S&C coach is worth their salt and they're having an issue with a track coach, and maybe the track coach is like, hey, like, I just don't feel like we're programming well enough for or we're not getting our needs met for like the throws group, then that strength conditioning coach like better get on the phone, or better start going and talking to somebody, and doing their due diligence to make sure that like that they're doing the best job that they can, right? I think it's really important for us to all have some initiative in trying to get better. And I think being able to, even like, I'm a big visual person, so if someone's like, hey, I want to do XYZ, whatever, I'm like, okay, show me what you want to do. And because it's really easy to kind of plug and play some things and take some, okay, we did I really liked the our first fall block at my old school. Take a look at it, tell me what you think. And then being able to kind of meet in the middle, I think, is really important, because there's, like, I said this before, there's always an opportunity to learn. You just have to look for it.
Hmm. I keep hearing communication, communication, communication.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Carly, where do you go from here? Typically we have a track and field coach and they talk about they want to become a head coach, or they want to go to this division, or they want to win a state title. But you're fully entrenched. You're 80% in the strength and conditioning world and 20%, I'm making up those numbers, on the track and field side. What do you envision the next 10, 20 years of your career? Continual path of leading with track and field in the strength and conditioning world, going back to full-time track and field coaching? Heck, for someone as talented as you, who knows? Maybe there's something. Maybe you're going to be a basketball coach because you started working more with basketball players.
Oh
What do
no.
you foresee? What are the goals, hopes, and dreams here?
Yeah, that's a really it's a really good question that I don't have a really good answer to, other than like, I this was like really my dream job. Like, I have really wanted to be in the role that I'm in right now for a few years. It was something that I thought could happen if the stars aligned, and the wind blows in the right direction. And I feel really fortunate to be where I am right now and to be given the opportunities that I have been at Parkside. So I'll start with that. And so a really interesting thing about my position is I have not had a boss in strength and conditioning yet.
Hmm.
Right? Like I went from being an assistant and we had an interim, but she's one of my best friends, so she doesn't really count. And jumping right into a head coach role. Right now, obviously, I've had experiences being the assistant and associate head with track and all that kind of stuff. But one of my big challenge right now at Parkside is, even though I feel like I'm doing a good job and I'm doing well in this role, I don't have anybody to teach me how to do it better. So I think for me, when I find the right opportunity to be mentored, will probably be when I make a change. But like I said before, my family is all here. I'm in what to me feels like a dream gig right now. I bought a house last summer. We already talked about my Tasmanian devil of a dog. So
Rooster.
it will rooster. Yeah. We will, it's going to take a lot to pull me away from this. It will, but I also know, kind of what I have been saying the whole time, like I'm obsessed with getting better.
Hmm.
And I think I can always raise my own personal bar, and we'll kind of see where that leads to next. I really enjoy all of the sports that I work with. I really like working with basketball. So I've never been I don't have a big desire to go like Power Five or anything like that, but I could see myself at like a mid-major D1 doing basketball, or track and something else. It will just kind of depend on the opportunity. But I don't know. We'll see. And I think that's part of what's really exciting about where I'm at right now is like I could really go anywhere. I could kind of do anything right now. And so we'll just kind of see where things go. But I'm really happy where I'm at.
None of us have the magic powers to actually see what 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, heck,
Yeah.
go back 5 years to you. And I don't think you could have seen today in the position, the role and the influence that you have
No.
today. So I think it's interesting to see your thirst for education and continual improvement, mentorship. In fact, I think that's what I kind of see in you, Carly. You're building something that's not there. You mentioned, like, I don't have a boss. I'm the director of strength and conditioning, so I don't have a super director, an executive director. Who do I learn from? I want to continue
Yeah.
to learn, and I
Yeah.
think people who have that kind of yearning typically see that absence in other places and organizations as well. So, like, I could see that being your niche of like, okay, I'm building out what this career looks like. Well, there's other people that could, and maybe we should have this in other places. Well, who's going to lead teaching people, encouraging people, uplifting people to go that route? And I kind of just see that with you. I mean, you're in a perfect position of being young today, meaning you have a long time to make influence, not only with other women in strength and conditioning and track and field, but just people in general, so that we're doing it more correctly. We're doing it more better for all of our sports, of course, including track and field, but doing all of our sports a better justice. So young people are, better equipped to maybe hit the dreams and goals that they have. So I just see that in, what the next 5, 10, 50 years looks like for you. I just see leadership of helping others gain roles in athletics that help young people around the country. So just want to encourage you with that as I kind of, hear your story and see the way you respond to questions. I just want to encourage you with that.
Appreciate that, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I know track and field coaches are busy. And so certainly a track and field coach who's also a director of strength and conditioning is extremely busy. So always grateful that you can carve out any time for us here on the podcast. So really thankful for you sitting down with us and sharing your journey. And like I said, I always use a track analogy typically at this point. I don't think I'm good enough to do a weight room analogy, but you're if you think about your 100-meter dash, and you think about that as your career, it's easy for us at the age and stage that you're at today, being so accomplished, to be able to think like, oh yeah, I'm probably halfway through my race. I've got the last half before I retire or whatever. It's so interesting with you and where you're at, Carly. You're maybe barely in the blocks. There's still a long race in front of you, a long career in front of you. So I'm super excited to be able to get you on wax, as they say here on the podcast today, because it's going to be interesting to see what the 5-year, 10-year updates are for you, because I think it's going to be continual growth. And I'm just super excited to be able to kind of be a small part and watch from the sidelines on how the rest of the career and life and influence goes along. So thank you so much for being here today. Super, super grateful for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for having me. It's been a lot of fun. So I appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to coming back soon.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. I told you, we said director of strength and conditioning. I told you we'd wrap this into track. We'd get there. I did not know we were going 1162 though, by the way. Holy cow. That's, I didn't tell you this, Carl. That's actually my PR.
Is it really?
Yeah, in the 60s. So I'm not sure it correlates, but
come on.
We're close. We're kind of like the same athlete, basically.
Yeah, but almost. I won't tell you what I ran in the 60, Mike.
Yeah, no. No way, no how. Couldn't get there. But thanks again for being here. Thanks for being here and listening to Carly's journey. Join us next week as we continue the goal of uplifting and honoring coaches around the world. Thanks, everybody.